2009 through 2017 Volvo Xc60 with the 2.5 liter turbo engine vacuum pump reseal. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive. I'm going to walk you step by step through the process of resealing the brake booster vacuum pump. We're going to get started by pulling the top engine cover off. All you do is lift straight up and pull off. It's just mounted with some rubber grommets. Now with a flat blade screwdriver, you're going to loosen the clamp here at the airbox here, and we're going to pull this boot off the airbox, and we're going to lift it out of our way. We're not going to take it all the way out of the vehicle. There's also a 90-degree elbow that we're going to pull off the air snorkel here. So you just pull it off, and then now we can lift the air snorkel upwards like this, and we can hold it out of our way. So the way I did that is you can either use a bungee cord underneath it and hook it around it like this and hook it onto the hood above, or you can just put something under it like a block of wood. So there's no need to go through the extra work to pull this whole boot out. So now we can get to the pump right here. The top of our airbox is in our way, so we're going to need a T25 Torx bit, and we're going to remove the 4 screws going around the airbox here. To make quick work of that, I'm using my Milwaukee Tools 1/4-inch drive stubby impact here. It makes jobs like this really easy. Now you can lift the top of the airbox off and set it aside. I left the mass airflow sensor plugged into it. You can do that as well, or if you feel like you need to get it completely out of the way, you need to unplug that. I left the mass airflow sensor plugged in, and I just routed it over here and set it on top of the valve cover. So now we're going to unbolt the vacuum pump. There's a 10mm bolt right back here on the back side of the pump, and then there's a 10mm bolt right here on the front side of the pump we need to get to. So here's a better look at the bolts, one right here, and then the one a little bit further back right here. They're both 10mm bolts. They're not too difficult to get to. With the 1/4-inch drive ratchet and a 10mm socket, the short socket, I was able to get back here in the back and crack the back bolt free. I've done these before where once I got them cracked free, I was able to spin them out by hand with just my fingertips. If they're giving you a little trouble, you can also use a wobbly socket like this with a little 10mm wobbly socket and an extension, and get back here and you can get to that fastener right here. The tricky part is once you get the bolt loose is not dropping it down on top of the transmission. So I was able to get my fingers back here, but you can also use a magnet. That works really well as well. You may notice that the vacuum hose is attached here and may think it's in your way, but it's a lot easier to take off once the pump has been removed. Now on the opposite side of the pump is another 10mm bolt right here. We're going to go ahead and remove that. I'm using the 1/4-inch wobbly and my extension with the ratchet here. Now the pump is unbolted. So now what we're going to do is pull it out towards the battery, and then we're going to get it in a better position where we can get the brake booster hose off of it, the vacuum hose. So I pulled it out like this. Now I can get it in a better position where I can work on the hose. So this brake booster vacuum pump is a pretty common oil leak. As you can see, this one's been leaking here and also from the case halves of the pump. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get this vacuum hose off, and you can usually squeeze the sides of the tabs on the pump, and the little tabs will flare open and you can pull the hose off. But sometimes it requires a little bit more effort and maybe the use of pliers. So mine was giving me a little bit of trouble, so I'm going to use some pliers to squeeze the sides of the brake booster hose, and that'll flare the tabs, and then I've worked the brake booster side to side and wiggle it and pull at the same time, and that should pop the hose off. Now that I got the hose off, you guys can see a little better what I'm squeezing on. So I'm squeezing on these tabs on the left and right side, and it's flaring 2 tabs open and allowing it to pull off the pump. So now we're going to take the pump apart and reseal it. I wanted to share a few of the part numbers for the kit that reseals this pump. I will link it up in the description of the video. That way if you need to pick it up, you can find it there. There's not a whole lot to this kit. It's just a couple of different O-rings that you're replacing in it. Before I take the pump apart and reseal it, I'm going to clean it up really well and get all the oil off as much of it as I can. I'm using a little bucket here and some brake cleaner or parts washer here. And I'm just giving this a thorough douching and wipe it down as best we can to get as much of this oil off of it. Now that I got the pump pretty much clean, I'm going to pick the seal off that goes on the outside here. This seals it to the back of the cylinder heads. To do that, I'm just using a 90-degree pick here and pick the seal out. Once we get this O-ring picked off, we're going to flip the pump over, and on the opposite side there's going to be 5 T25 Torx bolts we're going to remove. I'm going to use my stubby impact to do that. You can remove these fasteners with hand tools as well. Once you get the 5 fasteners removed, now you can pull the lid off like this. And we're going to set this aside. And then right inside here is a O-ring. We're going to pick this O-ring out like this and set this aside. Now we're just going to dump out all this oil and get this cleaned up on the inside here. So once you dump the oil out, now you can just use some parts cleaner and go ahead and spray it down and clean it up. I use brake clean to do this. Just give it a good thorough washing and you get as much of this oil out, especially in the track where the O-ring seats. You can also take the plunger out like this to help clean it up and just inspect it for any other damage. Make sure that there's no bearing play or anything like that. And if that's all good, then you can go ahead and finish cleaning it up. Once you get the pump pretty much cleaned up, now you can take the plunger portion of it here, wipe it down, and you can put this back inside the pump. It just goes in the slot right here, so you just slide it back in there until it seats. And then when you're pushing on it from the bottom, it pushes upwards a little bit. That's okay. So I recommend you operate it and make sure everything's working the way it's supposed to be. After checking the operation of it and determined that it's back together right, I went ahead and cleaned the track out one last time and got this good and clean and dry. Then I went ahead and wiped everything down with a rag, make sure everything was oil free as the best I can get it, including the outer cover there. Now that the pump is all cleaned up, we're going to put the new O-rings in it. So the first O-ring here is the one that goes on the outside. I'm going to set this aside for a second, and we're going to install the one that goes on the inside here. So you're going to just install this O-ring in the grooves right here. When you're installing these, you want to make sure that it doesn't twist. It has kind of like a flat spot on top of the O-ring. You want that facing upwards towards the top or the lid. So you want to just be careful that nothing is twisted. Now that the O-ring is installed, now we can go ahead and put the cap back on, or the lid, and bolt this up. This lid only goes on one way, so if the bolt patterns don't match up, just rotate it clockwise or counterclockwise until the bolt patterns match up. This kit also came with brand new bolts and fasteners. If your kit does not, I recommend that you clean the old bolts off and get all the oil off of it. And then we're going to put blue thread locker on the new or the old bolts on the threads, and this will prevent these from vibrating loose and coming back off and causing future leaks. So after installing blue thread locker on all the fasteners, I went ahead and started all the bolts by hand. Once I got all the fasteners started, I used my Milwaukee Tools 1/4 inch impact gun here to run all the fasteners in just until they're snug. So I ran them down till they were snug. I wasn't like hammering on them or anything. I tried looking up the torque spec for this. I could not locate that. So what we're going to do is after we get them run, I'll run down till they're snug. And so we're going to switch over to a ratchet, a hand ratchet. And we're going to finish them off by tightening them up by feel, so they're going to be snug and about a 1/4 turn more. I also tightened all these up in a crisscross pattern or a star pattern, kind of like what you would do for tightening up lug nuts. Now we can install the outer O-ring. It just slips around the base of the pump here, and just make sure it's fully seated. So the kit also comes with this portion where you mount the vacuum hose onto. It has all new O-rings and stuff, so we're going to take this out. You got to squeeze these tabs on the sides and it'll pop out. So I used a pair of these hose pliers right here to put the tips in the grooves on the left and right side of the pump and give it a little squeeze. And as you squeeze it, it squeezes the flare tabs and you can pull the adapter out. You're going to quickly want to wipe the inside of the port out with a rag. So now we can take our new adapter and we can put a little bit of soap and water on the O-rings, and that helps push it slide in, and you just press it in until it clicks into place. I just used the palm of my hand and pushed on it until it clicked, and now you're going to pull it to make sure it does not pop back off. So now the pump is ready to go back in. Before we install it though, we need to clean out the housing here where it mounted on the back of the cylinder head here. Inside there is where the cam gear is rotating, and that's what rotates the pump. So we need to clean this out with some rags and maybe some parts cleaner. So now if you look in the hole, there's a slot on the end of the camshaft here, and there's that's where the slot right here on the end of the pump line up with it. So you have to turn the pump and orientate it to the same direction as the slot on the camshaft there, and then you can take the pump and you can put it in there. You may have to rotate the pump gear a couple times, whatever, to get it to seat. But once you put it in there, and once it fully seats flush against the back of the cylinder head, you know you've got it right. It will not seat all the way if you don't have it right. Once you got it seated in the back of the cylinder head, now you can go ahead and start the 2 bolts, one on the left and one on the right side. So the bolt on the left is a lot easier to start, so I recommend you start that one first and then run it in until it's just about to touch or bottom out, and that'll hold everything into place while you start the second bolt. The bolt in the rear can be a little tricky to start. I use my fingers to get it back there and start it. You can also put the bolt into the wobbly socket, maybe with a piece of paper or something stuffed in the end of it, so it'll stay into place and you can run it in until it's snug. Now that both fasteners are started, then I just went ahead and ran them in until they're fully seated and snug, and then about a quarter turn more. And I did this for both bolts. Now that the pump is fully installed and seated, now I went ahead and just sprayed the whole area down with some brake clean and parts cleaner, try to wash it down towards the bottom of the vehicle. I'll use a pressure washer later and wash this all off. After this, you can push the brake booster hose back onto the port of the pump. It just pushes on until it clicks. Now you can take the air filter and airbox and put it back into position and start the 4 T25 torque bolts and run those in until they're snug. I just use my impact tool here to run them down until they're snug. Now we can take our block of wood or whatever our spacer was to hold it up out and go ahead and put the air snorkel back onto the box and then tighten up the clamp. And also the little 90-degree elbow here in the back, need to reposition that, and I'll show you how to tighten those clamps up. So once you get the snorkel on, go ahead and position the clamp in a good position and tighten that down. So once you got the hose clamp tightened up, now we're going to tighten up these pinch clamps here on the 90-degree elbow. So I just use my side cutters to squeeze the clamp a little harder, and I did the top and bottom here, and that tightened up the clamp so that it won't pop back off or won't leak vacuum. Now we can install the top engine cover. So you're going to look for the bottom side of the engine cover for these little round ports here. They're made out of rubber. Those are going to mount onto the little plastic studs that you see sticking up with a round ball on the end of it. So you'll line those all up. Once you get them lined up, you just press down like this and that'll lock it into place. Now you can go ahead and start the vehicle and run it and just double check for leaks. You also want to pump the brake pedal. If it feels super hard, like rock hard, and you can't hardly push it down, then that's not producing vacuum and something went wrong. But you should be in good shape. I will link up all the parts and tools that I use in the video in the description. That way, if you need to pick any of those up, you can find those links there. I'm Brian Essick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, encourage you to subscribe, and invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this. Thank you again for watching.